Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Call That Changed Everything. Roman Reynolds had always been a light sleeper. 20 years in military intelligence had trained him to wake at the slightest disturbance, a habit that had served him well in the corporate world and now, at 45, in his seemingly peaceful suburban life. But the shrill ring of Thelma's phone at 3 a.m. wasn't just any disturbance. It was the sound that would unravel everything he thought he knew about his marriage. Roman lay motionless in their king-sized bed, watching through half-closed eyes as his wife of 18 years fumbled for her phone in the darkness. Her hands trembled as she answered, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought we agreed you'd never call here," she said, her tone carrying a mixture of fear and anger that Roman had never heard before. He controlled his breathing, maintaining the steady rhythm of sleep while every muscle in his body tensed. In the darkness, he could see Thelma's silhouette rigid against the faint light filtering through their bedroom window. Whoever was on the other end was speaking in urgent, hushed tones that Roman couldn't quite make out, but he caught fragments, something about the plan and tonight. Then Thelma gasped, a sharp intake of breath that cut through the silence like a blade. "He won't be a problem. I'll make sure," she whispered into the phone, her voice now cold and determined in a way that made Roman's blood run cold. She turned slightly, and Roman felt her gaze on him. He maintained his facade of sleep, years of training keeping his breathing steady even as his mind raced. After what felt like an eternity, Thelma slipped out of bed and padded silently toward the bathroom, still clutching her phone. Roman's mind immediately shifted into tactical mode. 18 years of marriage, and he'd never seen this side of his wife. Thelma, the woman who organized charity galas and baked cookies for their daughter's school events, had just spoken with the cold efficiency of someone planning something sinister. The phrase, "he won't be a problem," echoed in his mind, and Roman was certain the he in question was him. Before he could process this revelation further, the soft patter of bare feet on hardwood announced another presence. Their 16-year-old daughter, Lindsay, appeared in the doorway, her face pale and eyes wide with terror. "Dad," she whispered urgently, glancing toward the bathroom where they could hear Thelma's muffled voice continuing the conversation. "You need to hide now." The words hit Roman like a physical blow. His own daughter was warning him of danger from her mother. This wasn't just about an affair. This was something far more serious. "Lindsay, what's—" he began to whisper, but she shook her head frantically. "There's no time. They're coming. Mom, she's not who you think she is. She's been planning this for months." Tears streamed down Lindsay's face as she spoke. "I overheard her talking to Uncle Jerome last week. They're going to—" The bathroom door opened, cutting her off. Lindsay quickly melted back into the shadows of the hallway as Thelma emerged, now fully dressed in dark clothing. In her hand was something that made Roman's blood freeze. His service pistol from the safe he thought only he knew the combination to. Thelma moved with practiced silence toward the bed, and Roman realized with crystal clarity that his wife of 18 years was planning to kill him in his sleep. Every instinct screamed at him to move, to fight, to survive, but Roman forced himself to remain still. He needed to understand the full scope of what he was dealing with. As Thelma approached the bed, Roman caught sight of her face in the dim light. Gone was any trace of the woman he'd married, replaced by someone cold and calculating. She raised the pistol with steady hands, and Roman knew that whatever came next, his old life was over. The Roman Reynolds who had trusted, who had loved without question, who had believed in the sanctity of his family, that man died in that moment. What remained was the predator he'd once been, the man who had earned his reputation in the darkest corners of military intelligence as someone you never crossed twice. Because Roman Reynolds never forgave, and he never forgot. Chapter 2. The Hunter Awakens. Roman's survival instincts kicked in with lethal precision. As Thelma raised the pistol, he rolled hard to the left, off the bed and onto the floor just as the muzzle flash lit up the room. The shot was silenced. She'd even thought to modify his own weapon. The bullet punched into a mattress where his head had been moments before. In one fluid motion, Roman swept Thelma's legs, sending her crashing to the floor. The pistol skittered across the hardwood as he pinned her down with minimal effort, his hand across her throat. "Who the hell are you?" he growled, his voice carrying the edge of a man who had interrogated enemies in places that didn't officially exist. Thelma's mask finally slipped completely, her face twisting into something ugly and unfamiliar. "You always were too smart for your own good, Roman. Jerome said you'd figure out eventually." "Jerome Massey," Roman said, the pieces clicking into place. Thelma's brother, the one who'd been so helpful when Roman left military service, who'd helped them relocate to this quiet suburb, who'd been a constant presence in their lives. "How long?" 3 years, she spat. 3 years of playing the loving wife to a man who never even suspected that his perfect little family was nothing but an operation. Roman's mind raced back through the timeline. 3 years ago, he'd been recruited by Meridian Securities, a private defense contractor, after his military discharge. The recruitment had come through Jerome's recommendation. Jerome, who'd claimed to have connections in the private sector. Jerome, who'd been Thelma's brother since birth, but whom Roman had never bothered to thoroughly investigate. "What's the endgame?" Roman asked, increasing pressure on her throat. Thelma smiled, even as she gasped for air. "Your security clearance, your access codes, your biometric data. You're worth 50 million to the right people, Roman. Dead, you're worth nothing but a life insurance payout." Roman heard movement downstairs. Multiple sets of footsteps trying to be quiet, but failing against someone with his training. They'd planned this as a home invasion gone wrong, probably with Roman as the heroic father who died defending his family. He released Thelma and moved to the window, peering through the blinds. 3 vehicles parked strategically around the house, engines running, occupants moving into position. Professional, but not military professional. Private contractors, probably ex-military themselves, but lacking the discipline that came with elite training. "Dad!" Lindsay's voice came from the hallway, tight with fear. "Stay where you are, sweetheart," Roman called back, his voice calm despite the situation. To Thelma, who was trying to crawl toward the pistol, he said, "How much of it was real?" "Any of it." "Does it matter?" she wheezed. Roman retrieved his pistol and checked the magazine. 3 rounds missing. She'd been practicing. "Lindsay is real," he said, more to himself than to her. "She warned me." "Lindsay doesn't know what's good for her," Thelma snarled. "She was supposed to stay out of this." That was when Roman understood the full scope of the betrayal. Not only had his wife been living a lie for 3 years, but she'd been willing to sacrifice their daughter's well-being, possibly her life, for whatever this operation was designed to accomplish. Roman had killed men for less. He zip-tied Thelma's hands behind her back with restraints he kept in his nightstand, old habits from his intelligence days, and secured her to the radiator. "You're going to tell me everything. Names, timelines, objectives, extraction plans. Everything. Go to hell," she spat. Roman smiled, and it was the smile that had made enemy combatants talk when traditional interrogation methods had failed. "Thelma, you've forgotten something important about my former profession. I didn't just gather intelligence, I extracted it. And I was very, very good at my job." He heard the soft sound of the front door being breached downstairs, followed by the careful footsteps of men trying to move silently through his house. Roman counted at least 4, possibly 6 intruders. Moving to his closet, Roman opened a hidden panel that revealed his war chest, weapons, ammunition, tactical gear, and communication equipment that Thelma had never known existed. As he strapped on body armor and loaded his preferred rifle, he felt the familiar cold calm that had made him one of the military's most effective operators. "This is what you never understood about me," he said to Thelma as he prepared for battle. "I wasn't just a soldier or an intelligence officer. I was the man they sent when everyone else had failed. I was the final solution." Roman checked his weapons one more time and moved toward the bedroom door. The men downstairs thought they were hunting a soft suburban husband. They were about to discover they'd walked into the den of an apex predator. "Lindsay," he called softly into the hallway. "Go to the panic room. Now." As his daughter's footsteps faded toward the hidden safe room he'd installed when they'd moved to the house, Roman allowed himself one last look at the woman he'd thought was his wife. "When this is over," he told her, "you're going to wish you'd aimed better." Chapter 3. First Blood. Roman moved through his own house like a ghost, every creaking floorboard and shadow mapped in his memory. The intruders were good, but they were operating in his territory now, and Roman had spent years learning to hunt humans in urban environments. He could hear them moving through the first floor, 2 in the kitchen, 1 near the front door, and at least 2 more in the living room. They were spreading out, probably planning to sweep upstairs in a coordinated assault. It was a sound tactical approach against a normal target. Roman wasn't normal. He slipped into Lindsay's room and opened her window, which led to the roof of the garage. From there, he could access the maple tree that he'd climbed dozens of times during weekend maintenance. Within minutes, he was on the ground outside, moving in a wide circle to approach the house from an unexpected angle. The surveillance team and the vehicles hadn't expected him to leave the house. Roman took out the driver of the first SUV with a sleeper hold, appropriated his radio, and listened to the tactical chatter. Alpha Team, status report. The voice was professional, military. Kitchen clear, moving to stairs. Copy that. Bravo Team, maintain perimeter. Negative contact on target. Wife confirmed secure upstairs. Roman smiled grimly. They still thought they were hunting an unsuspecting civilian. Time to change the dynamic. He slipped through the back door using a key hidden in a fake sprinkler head, another security measure Thelma had never known about. The first intruder in the kitchen never saw him coming. Roman's knife found the spot between the 3rd and 4th ribs, angled upward to the heart. The man dropped silently. The second kitchen operative turned at the soft sound of his partner's fall and found Roman's pistol pressed against his forehead. "How many?" Roman whispered. "6 total, plus support," the man gasped, recognizing death in Roman's eyes. Extraction plan? Helicopter pickup at the elementary school. 10 minutes. Roman zip-tied him and moved toward the living room. Through the doorway, he could see 2 men positioned near the stairs, assault rifles ready. Professional positioning, good sight lines, disciplined trigger control. Ex-military, definitely, but not elite tier. Roman triggered the house's security system from his phone, plunging the first floor into darkness and activating the infrared strobes that would disorient anyone wearing night vision. In the chaos that followed, he moved like a predator among prey. The first man went down with a broken neck before he could call out. The second managed to get off a shot that went wide before Roman's blade found his throat. The man by the front door tried to radio for backup, but found Roman behind him. The radio crushed and its owner unconscious. "Alpha Team, respond." The voice on the radio was getting urgent. Roman keyed the mic and spoke in the accent he'd perfected during operations in Eastern Europe. "Alpha Team is compromised. Target is not in the house. Repeat, target is not in the house." "Say again, Alpha." "Target has fled. We need immediate extraction. Abort mission." There was a pause, then, "Negative. Mission continues. Find the target." Roman smiled. Jerome wasn't going to let his people retreat, which meant Roman could pick them off one by one without worrying about reinforcements. The remaining 2 operators upstairs were now isolated and facing an enemy they'd underestimated. He climbed the back stairs, the ones Thelma didn't know about that led to the hidden passage between the walls, a Cold War-era addition by the home's original owner that Roman had discovered and enhanced. From inside the walls, he could hear the 2 remaining intruders searching the bedrooms. "Where the hell is he?" one of them muttered. "Check the daughter's room again. Maybe he's hiding with her." That decided their fate. Roman had been willing to let them live if they surrendered, but threatening Lindsay crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. He emerged from the wall panel behind the first operator and killed him quickly and quietly. The second one turned at the sound and found himself facing Roman across the upstairs hallway. "You're Roman Reynolds?" the man said, lowering his weapon slightly. "We heard stories about you in Afghanistan. The ghost of Kandahar." "You heard correctly," Roman replied, "which means you know what happens next." The man nodded slowly and placed his weapon on the floor. "I have a family." "So did I," Roman said and pulled the trigger. As the gunshot echoed through the house, Roman felt the familiar cold satisfaction that came with eliminating threats. But this was just the beginning. Jerome Massey had sent these men, which meant Jerome knew where Roman lived, knew his routines, knew his family. That was unacceptable. Roman returned to his bedroom, where Thelma was exactly where he'd left her, though her eyes were wide with shock at the sounds of combat from downstairs. 6 men, Roman said conversationally as he began cleaning his weapons. All dead. Your brother's going to be disappointed. You're insane, she whispered. No, Roman replied. I'm thorough. Now, you're going to tell me everything about Jerome's operation. Who he's working for, what they want with my clearance codes, where they're based, and how many more people are involved. I won't tell you anything. Roman finished cleaning his pistol and looked at her with the same expression he'd worn when interrogating Taliban commanders. Thelma, you've made 2 critical errors tonight. First, you underestimated who I am. Second, you threatened my daughter. He moved closer, and she could see something in his eyes that made her press back against the radiator. I've spent 20 years perfecting the art of extracting information from people who didn't want to give it. Some of them were trained to resist torture. Some of them were fanatics who welcomed death over betrayal. None of them held out forever. Roman knelt down, so they were eye level. You're not a fanatic, Thelma. You're just a woman who got in over her head and chose the wrong side. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell me everything I want to know, and in exchange, I might let you live long enough to spend the rest of your life in federal prison instead of dying very slowly in this bedroom. And if I don't, Roman's smile was cold as winter. Then I'll start with your fingers and work my way up. I have all night, and Jerome doesn't expect his team to check in until dawn. Thelma stared at him for a long moment, seeing clearly for the first time the man she tried to manipulate and betray. The suburban husband was gone, replaced by something that belonged in the shadows of foreign wars. She began to talk. Chapter 4. The Web Unravels. As dawn broke over the suburban neighborhood, Roman sat in his home office reviewing the intelligence Thelma had provided. The scope of the operation was larger than he'd initially suspected, and far more personal. Jerome Massey wasn't just Thelma's brother. He was a high-level operative for a consortium of foreign intelligence services and criminal organizations that specialized in recruiting long-term assets within the American defense establishment. The operation against Roman had been 3 years in the planning, beginning with Jerome's insertion into their lives after Roman's discharge from military service. But the most shocking revelation was about Lindsay. According to Thelma, their daughter wasn't his biological child. She was Jerome's daughter, placed with Thelma when Roman and Thelma were dating as part of a long-term infiltration plan. Lindsay had been raised to eventually become an asset herself. Roman's hands tightened on the intelligence report as he processed this information. For 16 years, he'd loved and protected a child who was genetically programmed to betray him. Yet Lindsay had warned him, had risked her own safety to save his life. A soft knock on the office door interrupted his thoughts. Dad. Lindsay's voice was tentative, uncertain. Come in, sweetheart. Lindsay entered the office, her eyes red from crying and her face pale with exhaustion. She'd spent the night in the panic room while Roman dealt with the cleanup. 6 bodies removed, blood cleaned, evidence sanitized. The efficiency of it spoke to years of experience in making problems disappear. Is she? Lindsay couldn't finish the question. Your mother is alive, Roman said carefully. She's in federal custody now. She's not my mother, Lindsay said quietly. I heard what she told you about my real father. About Jerome. Roman studied his daughter, the child he'd raised, taught to ride a bike, helped with homework, protected from nightmares. Genetically, she might be Jerome Massey's offspring, but she was his daughter in every way that mattered. DNA doesn't make a family, Lindsay. Love does. Loyalty does. Choice does. He paused, choosing his words carefully. You chose to warn me last night. You chose to save my life. That makes you my daughter, regardless of what any test might say. Tears streamed down Lindsay's face. I've known for 2 years. I overheard Mom and Uncle Jerome talking about the asset and realized they meant me. They wanted me to seduce information out of you, to become your confidant, so I could access your security protocols. But you didn't. How could I? You're my dad. You taught me right from wrong. You show me what real love looks like. She wiped her eyes. When I realized what they were planning, I started documenting everything. I have recordings, photographs, evidence of their meetings. Roman felt a surge of pride, mixed with concern. His 16-year-old daughter had been conducting a counterintelligence operation against her own mother and biological father. The training he'd given her, self-defense, situational awareness, critical thinking, had turned her into exactly the kind of person who could recognize and resist manipulation. "Show me," he said. For the next hour, Lindsay presented a comprehensive dossier that would have impressed professional intelligence analysts. She documented Jerome's visits, recorded conversations when possible, and even managed to photograph documents left carelessly around the house. The picture that emerged was of a sophisticated network that had been using their family as a base of operations for years. "There's something else," Lindsay said hesitantly. "Jerome has other families, other operations like this one. He showed me photographs once, said they were success stories of assets who'd chosen the right side." Roman's blood ran cold. This wasn't just about him. It was about a systematic program of infiltration and recruitment targeting American intelligence personnel. How many other families were living lies? How many other children were being groomed as future assets? Did you recognize any of the families in the photographs? Some of them. Remember the Dawsons from my old school? And the Warners from the country club? Lindsay pulled out her phone and showed Roman screenshots she'd taken. These are all families of people with security clearances. Jerome has been building a network for years. Roman studied the images, his military mind automatically cataloging targets and threats. Richard Dawson worked for the Defense Intelligence Agency. Christopher Warner was a contractor with Lockheed Martin. There were at least a dozen families in the photographs, all with children Lindsay's age or younger. "We need to expose this," Lindsay said. "We need to save those families." Roman was quiet for a long moment, considering options. The traditional approach would be to contact the FBI, turn over the evidence, and let the justice system handle it. But Roman had learned long ago that the justice system had limitations, especially when dealing with foreign intelligence operations. Courts required proof beyond reasonable doubt. International law enforcement was slow and bureaucratic. Diplomatic considerations often took precedence over justice. And most importantly, traditional justice wouldn't account for the personal betrayal he'd suffered or the danger his daughter had been placed in. "There's another way," Roman said finally. "We can end this operation permanently and send a message that will prevent anyone from trying something similar." "What kind of message?" Roman looked at his daughter, the girl who'd risked everything to save him, who'd conducted her own investigation to protect the country she loved, who'd chosen loyalty over blood. She deserved to know what kind of man her father really was. The kind that requires eliminating Jerome Massey and everyone associated with his network, Roman said simply. The kind that makes it clear that certain lines should never be crossed. Lindsay was quiet for a moment, processing this. Then she asked, "What do you need me to do?" Roman smiled, recognizing himself in her unflinching acceptance of what needed to be done. "First, we're going to make Jerome think his operation succeeded. Then we're going to use his own network against him." He pulled up a map on his computer, marking locations from Lindsay's evidence. "Jerome thinks I'm dead and that Thelma completed her mission. He'll want to debrief her and collect the intelligence she was supposed to gather. That gives us a narrow window to get close to him." "It's a trap," Lindsay said, understanding immediately. "The best kind," Roman agreed. "The kind where the prey thinks it's the predator." As they began planning, Roman felt the familiar cold focus that had made him so effective in military operations. But this time, it wasn't about national security or military objectives. This was personal. This was about family, the real kind, built on love and choice rather than genetics and manipulation. Jerome Massey had made the mistake of threatening the people Roman loved most. Now he was going to learn why Roman Reynolds never forgave and never forgot. Chapter 5, The Bait. Roman's plan required precision timing and a convincing performance from someone Jerome would never suspect, Lindsay herself. 3 days after the failed assassination attempt, Roman put the plan into motion. Lindsay sat in a coffee shop near Georgetown University, the same one where she'd met Jerome for uncle-niece bonding sessions over the past 2 years. To any observer, she looked like a traumatized teenager seeking comfort from a family member after her father's sudden death. Jerome Massey arrived exactly on time, his face a mask of concern that didn't quite reach his eyes. He was a tall, distinguished man in his 50s with prematurely gray hair and the kind of bearing that suggested military service. To the casual observer, he looked like exactly what he claimed to be, a successful businessman who doted on his sister's family. "Lindsay," he said, sliding into the booth across from her. "I came as soon as I heard. I'm so sorry about your father." Lindsay allowed tears to well up in her eyes. Not difficult, given the circumstances. "It happened so fast, Uncle Jerome. The police said it was a home invasion, but—" She let her voice trail off, the picture of a confused and frightened girl. "But what, sweetheart? Mom's been acting strange since it happened. She keeps talking about leaving town, starting over somewhere new. She's been making phone calls at all hours, speaking in languages I don't recognize." Lindsay leaned forward, lowering her voice. "I found Dad's gun in her purse yesterday. Why would she have his gun?" Jerome's expression didn't change, but Roman, watching from a table across the cafe through a directional microphone and camera hidden in Lindsay's backpack, caught the slight tightening around his eyes. Jerome was processing this information, trying to determine if Thelma had broken protocol or if this was genuine confusion from a grieving daughter. "Your mother is probably just scared," Jerome said carefully. "Sometimes people do strange things when they're processing grief." "Uncle Jerome," Lindsay said, her voice taking on the tone of desperate trust that teenagers used when seeking adult guidance. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." "Of course, sweetheart. Anything. Was Dad involved in something dangerous? Something that might have gotten him killed?" Jerome was quiet for a moment, and Roman could see the calculation in his eyes. This was the moment where Jerome would decide whether Lindsay was a potential asset or a liability. "Why do you ask that?" Jerome said finally. "Because I found things in his office. Hidden things." Lindsay pulled out a folder, one that Roman had carefully prepared with authentic-looking but ultimately harmless intelligence documents. These were in a secret compartment behind his bookshelf. "I don't understand what they are, but they look official." Jerome took the folder and examined its contents, his professional mask slipping slightly as he recognized the format and classification markings of genuine intelligence documents. The papers were authentic. Roman had access to plenty of declassified materials, but carefully selected to suggest ongoing operations without revealing anything truly sensitive. "Where exactly did you find these?" Jerome asked, his tone shifting subtly from concerned uncle to something more interrogative. "In a hidden panel. There were other things too, cash, passports with Dad's picture, but different names, some kind of electronic equipment." Lindsay was describing the contents of Roman's actual emergency cache, but one that he'd already evacuated and relocated. "Uncle Jerome, was my dad a spy?" Jerome studied her face carefully, looking for signs of deception. Lindsay met his gaze with a perfect mixture of fear, confusion, and desperate need for answers that any genuinely traumatized teenager would display. "Your father worked for the government in various capacities," Jerome said slowly. "Some of his work was classified, which is probably what you found. But Lindsay, this is exactly the kind of thing that could be dangerous if the wrong people knew about it." "What do you mean?" "I mean that if your father was targeted because of his work, then you and your mother could be in danger too. Especially if there are people who think you have access to sensitive information." Lindsay's eyes widened in perfectly calculated fear. "What should I do?" Jerome leaned back, and Roman could see the moment when Jerome made his decision. The girl was clearly unaware of her true parentage or the real nature of the operation. She was frightened, alone, and sitting on potentially valuable intelligence. Most importantly, she trusted Jerome implicitly. "First, you can't tell anyone else about what you found. Not the police, not your friends, not anyone." Jerome's voice carried a note of urgency. "Second, I think you and your mother should come stay with me for a while, just until we can figure out what's safe. Would you help me go through Dad's things?" Maybe figure out what's important and what isn't. Lindsay's voice carried exactly the right note of desperate gratitude. I don't know who else to trust. Of course, sweetheart. We're family. Jerome reached across and patted her hand. Why don't you bring your mother and come to my house this weekend? We can sort through everything together and make sure you're both safe. As they made arrangements for the weekend visit, Roman allowed himself a moment of cold satisfaction. Jerome had taken the bait completely. He thought he was recruiting a traumatized asset and gaining access to potentially valuable intelligence materials. Instead, he was inviting Roman Reynolds directly into his center of operations. After Jerome left, Lindsay walked to the restroom and used a prearranged signal to confirm the meeting had gone according to plan. Roman's response was equally subtle, a specific ringtone on her phone that confirmed Phase 2 could proceed. That evening, Roman and Lindsay reviewed the intelligence they'd gathered from the cafe meeting. The directional microphone had picked up not just Jerome's conversation with Lindsay, but also a phone call he'd made immediately after leaving the cafe. The package is secured, Jerome had said in what Roman recognized as coded language. The secondary asset is cooperative and uninformed. Extraction this weekend for full debrief and assessment. Roman translated for Lindsay. He thinks he's collecting you and your mother for interrogation and recruitment. He's planning to extract whatever intelligence he thinks we have, then either recruit you into his network or eliminate you as a security risk. And instead, Lindsay asked, he's going to discover that he's brought a predator directly into his den, Roman said grimly. Jerome Massey has spent 3 years believing he was manipulating me. This weekend, he's going to learn what it feels like to be hunted by someone who's very, very good at it. Roman pulled up architectural plans on his computer, Jerome's house, obtained through public records and satellite imagery. He thinks he's bringing 2 frightened women to safety. Instead, he's about to face the man who spent 20 years perfecting the art of killing people who threaten what he loves. As they finalized their preparations, Roman felt the familiar calm that preceded a mission. Jerome Massey had made this personal when he'd targeted Roman's family. Now Roman was going to show him exactly why that had been a fatal mistake. Chapter 6. Into the Lion's Den. Jerome Massey's estate sat on 15 acres of wooded land in rural Virginia, far enough from civilization to ensure privacy, but close enough to major transportation hubs for operational flexibility. Roman had spent the week conducting surveillance, mapping security systems, and identifying escape routes. The property was well defended, but not impregnable. Jerome was confident in his operational security, but not paranoid enough to account for an enemy of Roman's caliber. On Saturday morning, Roman and Lindsay arrived at the estate in separate vehicles. Roman posed as a grieving widow's brother, complete with falsified documents and a carefully constructed backstory that would satisfy casual scrutiny. Lindsay rode with the woman who was supposed to be Thelma, actually Sarah Chun, a former military intelligence colleague who owed Roman several favors and specialized in deep cover operations. Jerome met them at the front door, playing the role of concerned family member to perfection. "I'm so glad you decided to come," he said, embracing the fake Thelma warmly. "You look terrible, Thel. This whole situation has been such a nightmare." Sarah Chun was good at her job. She portrayed a woman on the edge of breakdown, clinging to Jerome like a lifeline while maintaining the subtle tells that suggested she was hiding something important. To Jerome, she would appear to be exactly what he expected, a co-conspirator trying to maintain cover while processing the trauma of murdering her husband. "I keep thinking someone's watching us," Sarah murmured, glancing around nervously. "What if Roman's people know what we did? What if they're coming for us?" "That's why you're here," Jerome assured her. "This place is completely secure. We can talk freely and figure out our next steps." Roman, playing the role of grieving brother-in-law, maintained appropriate emotional distance while carefully cataloging the security measures he observed. Cameras at strategic points, motion sensors along the perimeter, and what appeared to be at least 2 armed guards positioned discreetly around the property. Professional setup, but Roman had penetrated far more sophisticated defenses. Jerome led them into a comfortable sitting room where he'd prepared refreshments and tissues, the props of someone expecting to comfort grieving family members. But Roman noticed the subtle details that revealed the room's true purpose. The chairs were positioned to prevent easy access to the doors. There were no potential weapons within reach, and the acoustics were wrong in a way that suggested electronic monitoring. "First, I want you both to know that you're safe here," Jerome began, settling into a chair that gave him clear sight lines to all entrances. "But I need to understand exactly what happened that night. The official police report says Roman was killed during a home invasion, but I'm concerned there might be more to it." Sarah, playing Thelma, broke down into convincing sobs. It was supposed to be simple. Wait until he was asleep, make it look like an accident, then call for help. But he woke up somehow. He fought back. "And the team I sent to assist you? All dead," Sarah said between sobs. "Roman killed them all. I've never seen anything like it. He wasn't the man I married, Jerome. He was something else. Something terrible." Jerome's expression darkened. 6 professional operators, and he killed them all? "It was like he knew they were coming," Sarah continued. "Like he was waiting for them. When it was over, he looked at me and said he knew about you, about the operation, about everything." Roman watched Jerome process this information, seeing the exact moment when suspicion began to override confidence. Jerome was beginning to realize that his carefully planned operation had encountered something unexpected. "Did he say anything else?" Jerome asked carefully. "He said he was going to find you," Sarah whispered. "He said he was going to make you pay for what you'd done to his family." "But he's dead," Jerome said, though uncertainty was creeping into his voice. "Is he?" Sarah looked up, meeting Jerome's eyes directly. "They never found his body, Jerome. The house burned down after I escaped. The police assumed he died in the fire, but what if?" She was interrupted by the sound of breaking glass from somewhere else in the house, followed immediately by the sharp crack of gunfire. Jerome's eyes widened as he reached for the pistol under his jacket, but Roman was already moving. The grieving brother-in-law disappeared, replaced by the operator who had earned his reputation in the darkest corners of foreign wars. Roman's knife found Jerome's wrist before the pistol cleared its holster, and his other hand closed around Jerome's throat with precisely the right pressure to disable without killing. "Hello, Jerome," Roman said quietly as chaos erupted around them. "We need to talk." Jerome's eyes bulged with shock and terror as he recognized the voice of the man he believed dead. "Impossible," he gasped. "You're dead. Thelma killed you." "Thelma is in federal custody," Roman said conversationally as gunfire continued to echo through the house. "The woman you've been talking to is a professional, and the sounds you're hearing are my team eliminating your security personnel." "Your team?" Roman smiled coldly. "Did you really think I spent 20 years in military intelligence without making friends? Loyal friends. The kind who don't appreciate foreign operatives targeting American assets." Through the window, Jerome could see figures in tactical gear moving with professional precision around his property. Roman's team was actually a mix of active-duty special operations personnel and retired intelligence operatives, all of whom had personal reasons to object to foreign infiltration of American intelligence networks. "Now," Roman continued, "you're going to tell me about your entire operation. Every family you've infiltrated, every asset you've recruited, every handler you report to, and when you're done, you're going to help me dismantle the whole network." "I'll never." Roman increased pressure on Jerome's throat just enough to demonstrate that cooperation wasn't optional. "Jerome, you've made a fundamental error in judgment. You thought you were dealing with a soft target, a suburban husband who could be eliminated quietly. Instead, you've declared war on someone who spent 2 decades perfecting the art of making people and organizations disappear." As the gunfire outside died down and Roman's team secured the property, Jerome finally understood the scope of his miscalculation. He hadn't just failed to assassinate Roman Reynolds. He'd given Roman every justification he needed to destroy an entire intelligence network. "You have one chance to cooperate," Roman said quietly. "Take it." Jerome looked into Roman's eyes and saw his own death reflected there. Not immediate death, something far worse. The slow, methodical destruction of everything he'd built, everyone he cared about, every safe harbor he'd established over decades of careful planning. He began to talk. Chapter 7. The Network Falls. Jerome's confession took 6 hours and filled 43 pages of transcribed text. By the time he finished, Roman had the complete organizational structure of a foreign intelligence network that had been operating on American soil for over 15 years. The scope was staggering. 27 families infiltrated, including high-ranking personnel at the CIA, DIA, NSA, and major defense contractors. Sleeper agents planted as spouses, children, and trusted family friends. Assets recruited through blackmail, coercion, and long-term manipulation. A sophisticated support network that included safe houses, communication systems, and extraction protocols. 63 active assets, Roman said, reviewing the intelligence while Jerome sat restrained in the chair across from him. 14 handlers, 6 safe houses, 2 primary communication hubs. He looked up at Jerome. Impressive operation. Too bad you picked the wrong family to target. Jerome had progressed through the stages of defeat over the course of his interrogation. Denial, anger, bargaining, and finally a resigned acceptance that his life's work was about to be destroyed. What happens now, he asked. Now I give you a choice, Roman said. Option 1. I turn this intelligence over to the FBI, and you spend the rest of your life in federal prison while your network scatters to the wind. Some of them escape, some of them get arrested, and the damage to American security continues for years while the courts sort everything out. And option 2? Roman's smile was cold as winter. Option 2. You help me eliminate every single asset, handler, and support structure in your network. Permanently. Completely. No trials. No appeals. No chance for anyone to escape or rebuild. Jerome stared at him in horror. You're talking about murdering 63 people. I'm talking about eliminating foreign intelligence operatives who have infiltrated American security systems, Roman corrected. Some of them might survive if they surrender immediately and provide full cooperation. Others, he shrugged. Others chose their fate when they decided to betray their country. You can't just execute people without due process. Roman leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Jerome, let me explain something about due process. For 20 years, I operated in places where due process was a luxury we couldn't afford. When enemy combatants threatened American lives, we eliminated them. When foreign agents threatened American security, we neutralized them. The only difference between what I did overseas and what I'm planning to do here is geography. He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the wooded landscape where his team had finished cleaning up Jerome's security personnel. You've been treating this like a game, Jerome. Moving pieces around a board, manipulating families, destroying lives for the sake of intelligence and money. But this isn't a game. This is war. And in war, there are only 2 outcomes, victory or death. Roman turned back to Jerome, and his expression was utterly implacable. I'm offering you the chance to end this war quickly and quietly, with minimal collateral damage. Help me clean up your network, and some of your people might survive. Refuse, and I'll hunt them down one by one, starting with the ones closest to you. What about Lindsay? Jerome asked desperately. She's my daughter. Lindsay is my daughter, Roman said firmly. She chose loyalty over blood. She chose to protect her family over advancing your operation. She's earned the right to be safe from the consequences of your choices. Jerome was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications. Finally, he asked, if I cooperate, what happens to me? You disappear, Roman said simply. New identity, relocated somewhere you can't cause any more damage. It's more mercy than you deserve. But Lindsay asked me to spare your life if possible. And if I don't cooperate, Roman's expression didn't change. Then you die slowly, after watching me destroy everyone you've ever worked with or cared about. I'll make sure you understand exactly how much damage your network caused before I finally put you out of your misery. Jerome closed his eyes, feeling the weight of decades of careful planning crashing down around him. He'd built something magnificent, a network that could have influenced American policy for generations. But he'd made one critical error. He'd underestimated Roman Reynolds. I'll need guarantees, Jerome said finally. Written assurances about protection for cooperative assets, relocation assistance, immunity from prosecution. You're not in a position to negotiate terms, Roman pointed out. Then you'll have to hunt down 63 people the hard way, Jerome said with a flash of his old confidence. Without my help, some of them will escape. Some of them will rebuild elsewhere. Your victory won't be complete. Roman considered this for a moment, then nodded slowly. Limited immunity for assets who surrender voluntarily and provide full debriefings. Relocation assistance for those who cooperate completely. But handlers and support personnel are non-negotiable. They knew what they were doing. Agreed, Jerome said. Over the next 72 hours, Roman's expanded team, now including federal agents who specialized in counterintelligence operations, executed the most comprehensive roll-up of a foreign intelligence network in American history. Working from Jerome's detailed intelligence, they moved simultaneously against all 27 infiltrated families. Some of the operations went smoothly. Assets like Sarah Martinez, real name Katia Volkov, who had been posing as the wife of a Lockheed Martin engineer for 8 years, surrendered immediately when confronted with evidence of their activities. They were processed, debriefed, and relocated under new identities with the understanding that any future contact with foreign intelligence services would result in immediate termination. Other operations required more direct action. Handler Viktor Petrov, who had been coordinating West Coast operations from a safe house in Seattle, chose to fight rather than surrender. Roman personally led the team that eliminated him and his entire support cell. The official report would list it as a drug-related shooting, with no mention of foreign intelligence activities. The most challenging target was Dr. Elena Kozlov, who had spent 12 years posing as the wife of a CIA analyst while actually serving as a deep-cover intelligence officer for Russian foreign intelligence. When Roman's team moved on her safe house in McLean, Virginia, they discovered that she had anticipated exposure and prepared accordingly. Suicide vest, the team leader reported over comms. She's threatening to detonate if we don't withdraw. Roman, coordinating from the command vehicle, spoke directly to Elena through the team's communication system. Dr. Kozlov, this is Roman Reynolds. You have 30 seconds to surrender before I demonstrate why terrorist tactics don't work against someone with my background. You cannot stop us all, Elena replied in accented English. We are everywhere. We're your neighbors, your friends, your family. You cannot kill us all. Watch me, Roman said, and gave a signal. The sniper's bullet took Elena in the head before she could trigger the device, and the bomb disposal team secured the vest within minutes. As they processed the safe house, Roman felt the familiar cold satisfaction that came with eliminating a confirmed threat. By the end of the week, the network that Jerome had spent 15 years building was completely destroyed. 63 assets captured or eliminated. 14 handlers neutralized. 6 safe houses seized. 2 communication hubs dismantled. The damage to American security systems was being assessed and repaired by teams of cybersecurity specialists and counterintelligence analysts. It's over, Lindsay said as she reviewed the final reports with Roman in their hotel suite. They would be relocating soon. Their cover in the suburban neighborhood was blown, and they needed to disappear until the intelligence community finished processing the implications of the operation. This network is over, Roman corrected. There will be others. There always are. Will you hunt them too? Roman looked at his daughter, the girl who had chosen loyalty over blood, who had risked everything to protect her family, who had helped him destroy an intelligence network that threatened national security. She deserved honesty. If they threaten what I love, he said simply, yes. I will hunt them all. Chapter 8. Sins of the Father. 2 weeks after the network's destruction, Roman received a message that changed everything. Jerome had escaped federal custody. The details were sketchy, but the basic facts were clear. During transport to a secure facility for final processing, Jerome's vehicle had been ambushed by unknown attackers. 2 federal agents were dead, and Jerome had vanished without trace. Inside job, concluded FBI Special Agent Sarah Mitchell, the lead investigator on the case. Someone with access to transport schedules and routes. Professional operation, probably foreign intelligence using assets we haven't identified yet. Roman studied the crime scene photos in their temporary safe house, his expression growing darker with each image. This wasn't just an escape, it was a message. Jerome's handlers were telling Roman that the war wasn't over. Dad! Lindsay's voice carried a note of concern that had become familiar over the past weeks. What does this mean? It means Jerome lied to us, Roman said grimly. The network was larger than he admitted. There were people he didn't tell us about, support structures we didn't identify. And now, they have him back. Roman's phone buzzed with an encrypted message from an untraceable number. You took our family. Now we'll take yours. Jerome sends his regards. The message included a photograph that made Roman's blood run cold. It showed their old house, the one they'd abandoned after the assassination attempt, but taken recently. Someone had been watching the property, studying it, learning their patterns even after they'd relocated. They know where we used to live, Roman said, showing Lindsay the message. They know our routines, our contacts, our escape routes. Jerome had more time to study us than we realized. So what do? Roman was quiet for a moment, considering options. The traditional approach would be to go deeper underground, disappear completely, and hope the intelligence agencies could eventually track down Jerome and his remaining handlers. But Roman had learned over the years that running from enemies only encouraged them to chase harder. We end this permanently, he said finally. Jerome wants to play games with my family? I'm going to show him what happens when he threatens the people I love. Roman's plan was audacious in its simplicity. Instead of hiding, he would use himself and Lindsay as bait to draw Jerome and his remaining handlers into a trap. But this time, the trap will be designed not just to capture them, but to eliminate any possibility of future retaliation. I'm not letting you use yourself as bait, Lindsay said when Roman explained the plan. And I'm definitely not going to be some helpless victim waiting to be rescued. Lindsay, no, Dad. I've been trained by the best, she said, referring to the combat and tactical training Roman had given her over the years. I can shoot, I can fight, and I can think tactically. If we're going to end this, we're going to do it together. Roman looked at his daughter, 17 years old now, but with the steady nerves and cold judgment of someone much older. The girl who had warned him about the assassination attempt had grown into a young woman who could handle herself in dangerous situations. Together, then, he agreed, but we do this my way, with my rules and my level of ruthlessness. The trap was elaborate and multi-layered, designed to account for every possible response Jerome and his handlers might attempt. Roman leaked information through carefully monitored channels, suggesting that he and Lindsay would be attending a memorial service for the federal agents killed during Jerome's escape. The service was real, but Roman's attendance was fiction, part of a deception designed to draw his enemies into a killing ground of his choosing. The actual bait was much more subtle. Roman arranged for Lindsay to be accidentally spotted at Georgetown University, apparently enrolling for early admission courses. To any surveillance team, it would appear that Roman was trying to give his daughter a normal life while maintaining minimal security protocols. Jerome took the bait exactly as Roman had predicted. The first attempt came on a Tuesday evening as Lindsay walked across campus after a lecture. 3 men in a stolen van tried to grab her in broad daylight, clearly expecting a quick snatch-and-grab operation against a teenage girl with minimal protection. They discovered their error when Lindsay drew the concealed pistol Roman had trained her to use and put 2 rounds center mass into the lead attacker before diving behind a concrete barrier. The other 2 attackers found themselves facing not just an armed and trained teenager, but also Roman's support team, which had been shadowing Lindsay from concealed positions. The firefight lasted less than 30 seconds. When it was over, 2 attackers were dead and the third was wounded and in custody. But Roman wasn't satisfied. This had been a probing attack, designed to test their defenses and identify their capabilities. Jerome's learning, Roman told Lindsay as they reviewed tactical footage of the incident. He's adapting to our capabilities. The next attempt will be more sophisticated. The next attempt came 2 days later, and it was indeed more sophisticated. Instead of a direct assault, Jerome's remaining handlers tried psychological warfare. They released fabricated evidence suggesting that Roman had been working with foreign intelligence services himself, that his entire military career had been a cover for treason, and that the recent network destruction had been designed to eliminate competition rather than protect American interests. The disinformation campaign was professional and well-crafted, designed to turn American intelligence agencies against Roman and isolate him from official support. For a brief period, it worked. Several of Roman's government contacts stopped returning his calls, and Agent Mitchell informed him that he was being investigated for possible foreign connections. But Roman had anticipated this kind of attack and prepared accordingly. Over the years, he had maintained relationships with retired intelligence personnel who knew his true character and could vouch for his loyalty. More importantly, he had documented evidence of Jerome's network that proved beyond any doubt which side he was actually fighting for. Character assassination, Roman explained to Lindsay as they watched the false accusations spread through social media and alternative news sites. Classic technique when you can't eliminate someone physically. Turn their own people against them. Will it work? Roman smiled coldly. Jerome is about to discover that I have friends in very high places, and that some of those friends have been waiting for an excuse to eliminate foreign intelligence operations on American soil with extreme prejudice. The counter-disinformation campaign was swift and devastating. Within 48 hours, Jerome's fabricated evidence had been thoroughly debunked by independent analysts, and the sources of the false information had been traced back to known foreign intelligence assets. Instead of turning American agencies against Roman, the campaign had actually provided them with evidence of ongoing foreign intelligence activities that required immediate response. Authorization granted, Agent Mitchell informed Roman during a secure video conference. Full operational authority to eliminate Jerome Massey and any remaining network assets by any means necessary. No restrictions, no oversight, no questions asked afterward. Roman had been given what amounted to a hunting license from the United States government. Jerome Massey was now officially considered an enemy combatant operating on American soil, and Roman Reynolds was authorized to eliminate him using whatever methods he deemed appropriate. Where is he? Roman asked. Best intelligence suggests he's operating from a compound in rural West Virginia, Mitchell replied. Remote location, multiple escape routes, heavily defended. He's planning something big. Our sources suggest a major operation designed to retaliate for the network destruction. Roman studied the satellite imagery of Jerome's compound, his tactical mind automatically cataloging approaches, defenses, and vulnerabilities. This would be more than just a rescue operation or a simple elimination. This would be a direct assault against a fortified position defended by experienced operators. How many people? Roman asked. At least 12, possibly as many as 20. Mix of foreign intelligence operatives and hired mercenaries. Well-armed, well-trained, highly motivated. Roman nodded slowly. This was exactly the kind of operation he'd specialized in during his military career. High-risk assault against defended positions with minimal friendly casualties and maximum enemy elimination. I'll need a team, Roman said. You'll have whatever you need, Mitchell assured him. This is now a national security priority. Jerome Massey and his network have been classified as a clear and present danger to the United States. Eliminate them. As Roman began planning the assault, he felt the familiar cold clarity that preceded major operations. This wasn't just about protecting his family anymore. This was about ending a threat to American security that had been operating undetected for over a decade. Jerome Massey had made a fundamental error when he decided to target Roman Reynolds. He thought he was dealing with a soft suburban target who could be manipulated and eliminated. Instead, he declared war on someone who spent 20 years perfecting the art of eliminating people who threatened American interests. Now Jerome was about to learn the difference between intelligence operations and military operations. The difference between manipulation and direct action. The difference between thinking you're a predator and actually meeting one. Chapter 9, Final Justice. The assault on Jerome's compound began at 0300 hours on a moonless night in late October. Roman led a team of 12 elite operators, a mix of active-duty Special Forces personnel and retired intelligence operatives who had volunteered for what was officially classified as a counterterrorism operation against foreign assets. Jerome had chosen his location well. The compound sat in a valley surrounded by wooded hills, with clear sight lines in all directions and multiple escape routes through underground tunnels. Motion sensors and infrared cameras provided early warning, while strategically placed obstacles would channel any assault force into predetermined kill zones. It was exactly the kind of defensive position that would stop a conventional attack cold. Unfortunately for Jerome, Roman Reynolds had never been conventional. Overwatch in position came the voice of his sniper team leader, Sarah Chun, who had volunteered to provide long-range support from a ridgeline 800 meters away. I count 14 targets visible, probable additional personnel in the main building. Roger that, Overwatch. Phoenix team, status report. Phoenix team ready, responded Marcus Webb, leading the four-man element that would assault the compound from the north. Charges placed on target building. Awaiting your signal. Shadow team ready, added Lisa Park, whose team would handle the tunnel systems. Multiple escape routes identified and covered. Roman checked his equipment one final time. Assault rifle, sidearm, grenades, breaching charges, and the specialized ammunition he developed during his military career for dealing with body armor and hardened targets. Everything was configured for maximum lethality with minimum collateral damage. All teams, this is Control, Roman said into his radio. Execute Operation Payback in 30 seconds. Remember, no quarter, no prisoners, no survivors. These people have been operating on American soil for over a decade, and they killed federal agents during their escape. They forfeited any right to mercy. The assault began with Sarah's sniper rifle eliminating the 2 sentries on the compound's perimeter in quick succession. Before Jerome's people could react to the loss of their early warning system, Roman's breaching charges destroyed the main gate, and Phoenix team was pouring through the gap with automatic weapons blazing. Jerome had trained his people well. They responded to the assault with professional competence, falling back to prepare positions and laying down disciplined covering fire. But they were defending against someone who had spent 20 years studying how to break exactly this kind of defense. Roman moved through the compound like death incarnate, his rifle finding targets with mechanical precision while his team eliminated defenders with ruthless efficiency. The defenders were good, but Roman's team was better, and they had the advantage of surprise, superior equipment, and absolute motivation. Building secured, reported Phoenix team leader Webb. 6 enemy Kia, no friendly casualties. Tunnel systems secured, added Shadow team leader Park. 2 enemy eliminated attempting to escape through the underground route. No escapees. Roman reached the main building and kicked in the door, finding Jerome Massey in what appeared to be a command center filled with communications equipment, computers, and wall-mounted displays showing surveillance footage from around the compound. Jerome stood behind a desk with his hands raised, clearly recognizing that resistance was futile. Roman, Jerome said, his voice steady despite the circumstances. I have to admit, I underestimated you from the beginning. Yes, you did, Roman replied, keeping his rifle trained on Jerome's center mass. You thought you were dealing with a soft, suburban target. Instead, you declared war on someone who's very, very good at war. I suppose you're here to kill me. That was the plan, Roman said. But first, you're going to tell me about the operation you've been planning. The major retaliation my sources have been tracking. Jerome smiled, and Roman recognized the expression of someone who believed they still held winning cards. You think this compound is the end of it? You think eliminating my network was a victory? Roman, you have no idea what you've really accomplished. Enlighten me. You've proven that American intelligence networks are vulnerable to infiltration and manipulation. You've demonstrated that private citizens can conduct military operations on American soil without meaningful government oversight. Most importantly, you've shown foreign intelligence services exactly how to identify, target, and eliminate American intelligence personnel. Jerome gestured to the equipment around them. Everything that's happened here, every technique you've used, every tactical decision you've made, has been recorded and transmitted to intelligence services in Moscow, Beijing, Tehran, and a dozen other capitals. You think you've been protecting American security? You've actually been providing foreign powers with a masterclass in how to destroy it. Roman felt a chill of recognition. Jerome was right. Every tactical technique, every operational methodology, every security protocol Roman had employed during the network destruction had been observed and analyzed by hostile intelligence services. Instead of protecting American security, Roman had inadvertently provided enemies with detailed intelligence about American counterintelligence capabilities. "You're lying," Roman said, but doubt was creeping into his voice. "Check the computers," Jerome said confidently. "Everything has been live-streamed to secure servers around the world. Your face, your methods, your team's capabilities, all of it now part of training materials being distributed to foreign intelligence academies." Roman moved to the nearest computer terminal while keeping his weapon trained on Jerome. The screen showed active video feeds being transmitted to multiple international locations, along with analytical software that was cataloging and categorizing every aspect of the assault in real time. Months of planning, Jerome continued. The entire network, the assassination attempt, even my escape from federal custody, all of it designed to draw you into exactly this kind of operation. "You're not hunting us, Roman. We're studying you." Roman's finger tightened on the trigger as he realized the full scope of Jerome's deception. The man hadn't just infiltrated Roman's family. He manipulated Roman himself into becoming an intelligence asset for foreign powers. "Last words?" Roman asked. Jerome's smile widened. "Look behind you." Roman spun around to find Lindsay standing in the doorway of the command center, but she wasn't alone. Flanking her were two armed men Roman didn't recognize, and Lindsay's hands were bound behind her back. "Hello, Father," Lindsay said, but her voice carried an accent that hadn't been there before, the same accent Roman had heard during Jerome's phone conversations. "I think it's time we had an honest conversation about family loyalty." Roman's world tilted as he realized the final, devastating truth. Lindsay hadn't been an unwilling asset or an innocent victim. She'd been a deep-cover operative from the beginning, placed with Thelma when she was still a baby and raised specifically to infiltrate Roman's life. 16 years, Lindsay continued, her voice now cold and professional. 16 years of pretending to be your daughter, learning your methods, studying your capabilities, waiting for the moment when you would finally reveal your true potential. "The warning," Roman said, understanding flooding through him. "You warned me about the assassination attempt." "Because the assassination was never meant to succeed," Lindsay replied. "It was designed to activate you, to force you to reveal the full extent of your training and capabilities. Every decision you've made since that night has been observed, recorded, and analyzed by intelligence services around the world." Roman raised his rifle, but hesitated as he looked at the girl he'd raised as his daughter for 16 years. Despite everything, the betrayal, the manipulation, the lies, some part of him still saw the child who had asked him to help with homework, who had sought his comfort during nightmares, who had learned to drive in his car. "I do love you, you know," Lindsay said softly. "In my own way. You taught me right from wrong, just like you said. You show me what real strength looks like. But you also taught me that family is about choice, not genetics. And I've chosen my real family." "Your real family?" Roman asked. "The intelligence service that gave me purpose," Lindsay replied. "The mission that gave my life meaning. The cause that's bigger than any one person or country." Roman felt the last pieces of his old life crumbling away. His wife had been an enemy agent. His daughter was a deep-cover operative. His family had been a lie from the very beginning. But as he stood in that command center, surrounded by enemies and facing the ultimate betrayal, Roman felt something unexpected: relief. The guilt he'd carried about potentially putting Lindsay in danger, the concern about her emotional well-being, the careful balance between training her for dangerous situations while trying to preserve her innocence. All of it was suddenly irrelevant. Lindsay wasn't his daughter. She was an enemy combatant who had spent 16 years infiltrating his life and stealing his secrets. and Roman Reynolds had spent 20 years learning how to eliminate enemy combatants with extreme prejudice. "Thank you," Roman said quietly. "For what?" Lindsay asked, momentarily confused by his calm response. "For finally giving me permission to stop holding back." Roman's transformation was instantaneous and absolute. The conflicted father disappeared, replaced by the apex predator who had earned his reputation in the darkest corners of foreign wars. His rifle came up within human speed, and his first shot took down one of Lindsay's guards before anyone could react. The second guard tried to use Lindsay as a shield, but Roman's second shot went through her shoulder and into the guard center mass. Lindsay screamed and fell as Jerome tried to draw a concealed weapon, but Roman's third shot ended that threat permanently. As Lindsay lay on the floor, bleeding but alive, she looked up at Roman with a mixture of pain and something that might have been respect. "You really are everything they said you were," she gasped. "And you're exactly what I spent 20 years learning to eliminate," Roman replied. "An enemy asset operating on American soil." "So what happens now?" Lindsay asked. Roman looked down at the girl who had pretended to be his daughter for 16 years, who had manipulated his emotions and stolen his secrets, who had been willing to sacrifice his life for the sake of her mission. She was wounded, but not critically, and she was still valuable as an intelligence asset. But Roman Reynolds never forgave betrayal, and he never forgot those who threatened what he loved. Lindsay had made her choice when she'd chosen her real family over the man who had raised her. "Now you learn the difference between thinking you're a predator and actually meeting one," Roman said, and pulled the trigger one final time. As the echoes of the gunshot faded through the compound, Roman stood alone among the bodies of his enemies. His radio crackled with status reports from his team. All hostiles eliminated, no friendly casualties, compound secured. "Control, this is Overwatch," came Sarah Chen's voice. "Confirm mission status." Roman looked around the command center one last time, taking in the computers that had recorded his every move, the communication equipment that had transmitted intelligence to foreign powers, and the bodies of the people who had spent years manipulating and betraying him. "Mission complete," Roman said into his radio. "All objectives eliminated. No survivors." As his team began the process of destroying the compound and eliminating any evidence of foreign intelligence activities, Roman felt the familiar cold satisfaction that came with completing a successful operation. The network that had infiltrated his life was completely destroyed. The people who had betrayed him were dead. The threat to American security had been neutralized. But most importantly, Roman Reynolds had proven once again why he was the man other operators called when every other option had failed. He was the final solution, the ultimate predator, the one who never forgave and never forgot. And anyone who threatened what he loved learned that lesson exactly once. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.